So we're Did You Know Gaming, or 3 members of Did You Know Gaming. It's actually a 5-man team. 2 of them are in the States. We're sort of the English lot. We have a few shows on YouTube. We have Did You Know Gaming, which is basically where we check out historical information about a game, how it's developed, or random trivia to do with it. We also have a show called Did You Know Gaming Extra, where we sort of talk about a theme in gaming. For our presentation, we're going to concentrate on our show Region Locked. And Region Locked is basically a show where we explore games that were sort of stuck in a certain country or a certain region. So I don't know how much you obviously know about video games, but you have like different regional areas, which Greg will tell you all about.
Yes. There are 4 distinct regions in video games. There's 3 that are NTSC. The names are based on how TVs work, which is kind of part of history, but it doesn't, You've got NTSC-J, which is Japan and Asia, NTSC-C, which is China, NTSC-U, which is the US and South America, and then PAL. They tend to keep games to certain areas depending on certain things.
So what we're covering today is like just a few games that we were going to make videos about, or we felt like there wasn't really enough to make a full-blown video on. So we find that they're kind of weird and different, so we wanted to point out some various like different games for different regions and different reasons why they didn't come out. So we're going to start with a game which Matt picked, which is...
This one's quite a weird one, and we'll see it from the various videos up here. It's called Oh No. It was released on the 16th of November 2000, and it's on the PlayStation, and it was Japan exclusive. Basically, the very simple story of this is that you play a group of snotty teens, or kids, really, I should say. The main one of these 3 is Brudder. I think that's the one that's talking on the left there. They are literally snotty-nosed. And they also have the younger brother and his cousin. They pretty much just wear white shorts, and as you can see, it's an infinite runner game. The player switches round just like that. You can do it 2 ways with the triangle button to sort of get through these gaps and avoid obstacles. And effectively through the whole game, you're trying to pick up various food items because the whole game is you're trying to feed yourself. When you get hit, your HP goes down or you get more hungry. Throughout the whole game, your health is also being depleted gradually anyway. So you always want to be picking up the food. Gradually, through the whole game, more and more characters join up. So you start off with 2, you then move to 3, and then you have a 4th one that comes in and out every so often, so it gets more and more difficult to play. As you can see here, it's all a bit different. Instead of a boss, you get a dancing mini-game, and it comes in 2 variations. Either you've got a series of buttons that you need to press over and over and over again for 10 seconds straight, or it's like a classic dancing minigame where you're pressing whatever button comes up on screen. Now, the game has 3 campaigns. 2 of them are called Oh No mode, mainly because the main character is called Brudder Oh No, and then the next character you can play as is Elisa Oh No. But in Japan, they're pronounced differently, but they're just spelled Oh No. You also get Crazy Mode, which is basically easy mode. Once you do those first 2 modes, which are effectively endless runners, you get Crazy Mode, which gives you infinite health and gets rid of all the fish sandwiches, which effectively just takes away any of the game at that point, but you get to just run through it all. Another mode is Mocha Mode. It's just all the dance challenges. And then you get the great 2-player mode, which is Love Love Mode, which sounds a bit dodgy, but it's a co-op mode in which 2 people are controlling the 2 characters. They can run forwards, backwards, left and right, unlike the main game where they're all sort of stuck together. But you've got to keep holding hands for as long as possible through the game. You also get Funky Battle Mode, which is the same, but you're pitting against each other and getting the most points. The guy that narrates the whole weird story is Shiro Suzuki. He is a famous broadcaster in Japan for TBS and is a big fan of Resident Evil. And the reason they got him in is effectively he delivers the whole thing very seriously and very deadpan.
So, Kuma Eater is a really interesting game. So the name Kuma Eater means bear song, and this was released on the PlayStation 2 in 2003. Basically, you make songs, and the bear performs them, and there's not really much else to the game. The polar bear has given up his peaceful life in nature because he wants to become an enka singer. So enka is a style of music, we don't really have it here. In Japan, it's kind of like sentimental ballads, or they're sort of about love, loss, or nostalgia, I suppose. The goal is to get him to the top of the charts, which is not very easy, and the singing is all synthesized. So, you know, like, what are they called? Like Hatsumiku, what's the name of when they, Vocaloids, right. So with Hatsumiku, obviously that became super popular because it was pop music. This is enka music, which is all kind of associated with old people and not gamers, so no one really kind of got into it. As you can tell, the visuals have nothing to do with anything. Like, it's just so bizarre. So, as I said, it came before Hatsumiku. Hatsumiku made Vocaloids huge, whereas this was like a really early experiment, which is kind of what the PlayStation 2 is known for. Gloves. So, basically, a lot of younger people got it and said it was really boring, super drab music, and you couldn't really do much. And so it just didn't sell, and they obviously thought, what's the point of releasing it anywhere else besides Japan? I'll let this one start. So that's Kuma Eater. Very, very bizarre game, which I stumbled on one day.
Super loud. So I'm going to be talking about Gregorys Horror Show, because my name's Gregory. It's a survival horror game made by Capcom, famed for their survival horror, like Resident Evil, what else, Devil May Cry, and more recently probably Dead Rising counts, I guess. Released in December of 2003, as you can see on screen. It's actually based on a CGI anime series that was only in Japan from 1999 till 2003 by a woman named Naomi Iwata, and she actually went on to produce the most recent Pingu show, which is a totally CGI Pingu. Apparently Pingu's super popular in Japan for some reason. They do love cute animals, I guess that's what it is. The story of the game is basically the player turns up at a hotel, and then his first night staying there, he gets visited by death in one of his dreams, haunting. And he says that you need to collect the souls of the other guests because they can't escape. So basically what you do is you try and get into people's rooms and take their soul, which they're all in bottles, it's fine. It's not like stealing them and just, anyway. To be honest, that's pretty much it. It's like a standard puzzle, survival horror, it's good stuff, anyway. Sorry. Yes, they even include herbs in the game, just like in Resident Evil. I guess that's like a little bit of a reference for you there. It was released in Japan and Europe, which is weird because you'd think if they have a full English translation, why wouldn't they release it in America? Because it's the same language, obviously. Yes, but they did actually announce it at E3 in America, and it just never materialized, which is particularly strange because in 2003, there were a huge amount of survival horror games. It was really popular at the time. I've got a list here. Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil Outbreak, lots of Resident Evil, Silent Hill 3, and Luigi's Mansion. Yeah, it's most interesting because it's one of the few survival horror games that's really aimed at children, even though it's pretty spooky, pretty weird. Yeah, so that's that for you there.
For the record, by the way, we actually had this game as a kid, and I never got past the first night because it was actually quite creepy.
The next up is kind of an unusual one, seeing as it's a Marvel one. It was released on the 13th of November 2014 on the Nintendo 3DS. This is Marvel Disc Wars: The Avengers. And this was based on an anime that at the time was only in Japan. Now I think it's got a dub in English. The story for the anime is really weird. It's Iron Man and Dr. Nozomu Akatsuki, sorry for butchering that, create a digital identity security kit, or DISC for short. They use that to capture villains and contain them. Loki comes along, naturally, when Iron Man's showing off this equipment in a prison. Loki comes along and ruins this and releases all the villains and captures Iron Man, Captain America, the Wasp, Hulk, and Thor into these discs permanently. They then get in possession of 5 kids who go around trying to capture all the other villains. They have the biocodes to release them. However, they only come out for 5.5 minutes at every time. So all these Avengers are permanently stored in these discs and aren't having existential crises every time they're released for 5 minutes to battle other villains in which they're trying to capture them. But pretty much it's like a Pokemon game, effectively. Oh, well, Pokemon series, as you say. The game isn't as much. The game is effectively quite simple. It's fight a boss villain with all his henchmen around like this, so they're going out Hulk, and you can switch out the characters and replace them when your hero is obviously dying and things. At the time, Spider-Man was in the game, but wasn't in the anime. There are 13 playable characters, including like with Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, and the Wasp, and Spider-Man, and there were various enemies as well. That's pretty much it, really, on that game. It's quite a simple one.
Monster Tale. So I love this game. I had this game when I was younger, when the DS first came out. So this is a US exclusive, which is very, very rare, particularly on like consoles like Nintendo consoles, because it's kind of a Japanese company and everything else. So it's like a combination Metroidvania pet raising game thing, where you play as a girl called Ellie and her monster Chomp in the monster world. Very, very simple premise. They have to stop the aggressive takeover of the Kid Kings, because apparently adults can't go to the monster world. And you basically have to go through this world and find a way of getting Ellie back home. It's the voice of the little monster is actually the same voice as Chopper in One Piece, which is kind of bizarre. I actually got a professional voice actor for effectively grunts and gurgles. So one interesting thing about this game, which I think says quite a lot about the way in which marketing of a game works in the US, it wasn't a hugely successful game. And they said that they struggled to get a publisher for it, basically because they had a young female protagonist. And I've got a quote, and it is, "This choice was actually somewhat controversial with some publishers. Our experience was that many publishers are looking to avert the risk of a main character that hasn't been proven to capture large audiences. So as a result, there was some concern from publishers that Ellie should change to a male character or a more mature or sexy female character." So I like the fact that this is a game which is kind of geared towards a more traditionally younger male audience, and yet doesn't change it based on the character's gender. It's not even a part of the plot. The company that made it were Dream Rift, and they were a new company, and they wanted to show a passion for creating new IPs. So they made up all of this themselves, and then just went to get it published, which was very successful for them because they later made the Epic Mickey game on the 3DS. They also intended to make a remake of this game called Monster Tale Ultimate, where they announced it in 2015 for the 3DS, promising to improve basically everything, and then they never talked about it again. So it's been 3 years, and I'm hoping maybe they might see something to do with anything we cover with it at some point and bring it back, because it was a really good game.
So this is actually a really interesting game. We were making a video about accessibility in video games. And we came across this, which is a video game for blind people. It's, it was released in 1997 on the Sega Saturn. Originally, on the Saturn version, there's no display at all. It's literally just a black screen for the entire game. But then when they re-released it on the Dreamcast 2 years later, you get nice, pleasant images. So how the game works is it's basically, do you remember the Choose Your Own Adventure game books that were very popular? Everyone loves them, right? It's essentially that. So you listen to what's happening and then you make a decision based on the conversation and that leads you down a path, blah, blah, blah. The story is basically a girl and a guy really like each other and then, they get separated, they meet up again, they get separated, and then someone mysteriously disappears in a train station and they get wrapped up in the mystery. Tale as old as time. Yes, Kenji Eno was the designer of the game. He made there's a cult classic horror game called D, which came out a long time ago now. He visited fans in a hospital fans of his game, and a lot of them were blind kids, and he thought, well, how come they can't enjoy a game the same way we can? They have to struggle to play a game because you can't see it. So why don't I make a game specifically for them? I've actually got a quote from him here. He says, "Of course, blind people are not able to have the full experience. They're kind of trying to force themselves to be able to play, but they're making the effort. So I thought, if you turn off the monitor, both of you hearing the game, so after you finish, you can have an equal conversation about your experience." He went on to make a deal with Sega that they would donate 1,000 Sega Saturns to blind people, and he would donate 1,000 copies of the game as well, which is really nice. He went on to include a blindness mechanic in a lot of his later games with sections in games where the player would go blind and you'd have to navigate without seeing, and invisible enemies, stuff like that. They were going to go on to make a sequel to the game, but because with video games often, or at least more back in the day, the audio files are massive, even compared to regular graphics, especially with a game like this, because it's 4 pictures for the entire game. But they couldn't compress the sound enough to fit it on any of the consoles, so they just dropped it after a while. I mean, it was never localized because the entire thing is in Japanese and you'd need to hire all the voice actors, re-record the entire game essentially. So it just never came here, but very interesting concept for a game.
One thing that's also quite interesting about it is that they were planning to make a few sequels for this, and there was a comedy one they were planning to do, and they basically took quite a lot of the story for that and put it into D2, which was the sequel to D, which is a very good horror game. If you've never played it, you should check it out. And it's also very collectible because it was weird when they released it. It was all in Braille for the instruction books, and it came with a pack of seeds. There's no reason, it just did. So this is the last game we have to cover, and this is Cayenne, which is it's based on a film. We're all going to talk about this a bit, but it's based on a CG film which had Kirsten Dunst play the main role, and it was the last role of Richard Harris, and it was kind of a terrible movie. It was made by or written by Chris Delaporte, who it was the first French-based CG movie. And work started in 1995 after he sort of left the studio that were working on Heart of Darkness on the PlayStation 1. If you've never seen Heart of Darkness, it's a weird game. Very, very good. So the film was, as I said, really, really, really bad. It earned $500,000 in the box office, which was mostly in France. And it cost them $26 million to make it. So it bombed very badly.
The game just follows the film, not much in any way of the extra plot. The team who worked on it were picked for the motivation rather from the experience from all over Europe, with only a few professionals in the field, meaning that there were a lot of on-the-job training. The original company handed game development to Xilum, who worked on the Fifth Element game and Stupid Invaders on the Dreamcast.
They did hand out review copies of the game. I think they're all in French, so not many people played them. And oh yeah, the company went. They hired they hired a bunch of unknown developers to help work on their game, which maybe is why it didn't go so well. I don't know, but yeah.
So what's actually really cool about this game is that obviously it's a game based on a film which they originally wanted to make as a game anyway. So I don't know what they were thinking, because the game is really bad. So it never would have worked as a game in the first place. The plot just kind of divulges into weird stuff that just would not fit. And as I said, it only came out in Japan. The film never came out in Japan. So why they did that, no one knows. And that is it. We really tried on this end slate.
Yeah.
Cool.